I have a video of a press conference, or at least part of the press conference, that Ron DeSantis, Governor Ron DeSantis of Florida, had about legal and illegal immigration. I'm sure it was about other things, but this excerpt is going to be about that. And since it's a topic that I've covered on this channel, I couldn't help but resist to get into that. I also have a comment towards the end from someone that I know that I want to get into and cover as well. So without any further ado, let's get into it.
Sources the workforce for industries like hospitality and tourism.
Well, excuse me though. You said immigrants make up. Yes, we have legal immigrants in Florida. So you can't conflate illegal immigrants with people who are here legally. Now, I've also said we've got some big problems with some of the legal immigration programs that we have. I mean, we've seen this H1B program, how companies will bring in H1B, the Americans train the H1B, and then they fire the Americans and hire the H1B. How would that even remotely be acceptable?
It isn't acceptable. He knows it. The things I like about DeSantis is he's no dummy. He's Harvard Law graduate. And being the governor of Florida, he's uniquely positioned to understand that what he just talked about, American citizens taking having to train their own H-1B replacement, he knows that very well because of Disney. It didn't happen on his watch, but he knows that it has, and he's had his run-ins with Disney. Apparently, because of him, we've learned that Disney has some sweetheart deal where they get to patrol themselves. They get to police their own, all of that land that they have out there in Florida with Disney World. And he was taking away some of those benefits and got head to head with his administration as a result of that. But he knows the story, and he knows it's not just Disney. A lot of these stories go under the radar because the H-1B candidate's not going to talk about it because it's going to affect their visa status. And the American citizen's not going to talk about it because they likely signed a non-disclosure agreement in order to get some sort of severance, even though they're being let go. I'm sure it was unexpected, and if they didn't cooperate with some sort of non-disclosure agreement or do the training, then they would have just been fired that day. But let's continue.
You have chain migration, which is not merit-based and is bringing in more distant relatives. Not what you want. So there's a whole host of issues there that need major reform. But from an immigration enforcement perspective, I mean, if somebody is here on like an H-2A visa, they are working in the state of Florida legally. And when we did E-Verify, people would say, we had to verify an act, they'd say, hey, there's a busload of farm workers. I saw them on I-4. And people assume they're illegal. And then FDLE looks, they all had the H-2A visas. And so there's no enforcement if somebody is here on valid reasons. Now, it doesn't prevent us or Congress and people like me from just using my platform to say, hey, you may need to look at how we're doing legal immigration in this country because it's not America first the way it's going. But we do have, I think we probably have the highest foreign-born population in the country of any state. Certainly we're in the top 5 for sure. And yet, I would point out, I came in, we did sanctuary city ban. People say, oh, you can't do that. You know, we have, it was the people.
I would say Texas has a high foreign-born population as well. A city not far from me, I looked at the students' makeup. I used to live there in that city, and 1/3 of the students are now Asian. 1/3. And Asian likely meaning Asian Indian. I don't think all of that is, what's the word I'm looking for, organic. I don't think it's all organic. I think a lot of it is because of the tech industry out here and a lot of the H-1B stuff. I was a recruiter. I ran into it. Recruiters today are still running into it. So there's a surplus of that going on. On top of that, we're also a border state. Quite a few Hispanics out here. If we got E-Verify, I wonder how many Hispanics will be unemployed if we started using E-Verify to the extent it sounds like he's using out there in Florida. But let's continue.
The first generation, they wanted the sanctuary city ban. When we did the legal transports to things like Martha's Vineyard, people said, oh, the Venezuelans in Miami aren't going to like that, because I guess a lot of the people that got transported to Venezuela. I go down there, these guys are high-fiving me because they think Maduro's sending undesirables to the country. So this whole idea that somehow people that are first generation do not want to see immigration enforcement, that is totally not the case. And just look at the election results in Miami-Dade County. We were, 8 years ago? We had a Hillary winning by 30 points. I carried it by double digits 2 years ago. Donald Trump carried it by double digits, and we both ran strong on immigration. So don't conflate the two.
Yeah, I'm glad that's starting to show in the numbers, that just because you're tough on immigration, you're America first, that you're for citizens first, that you're not necessarily anti people of a particular race. And that the people here who have some of their roots in these other countries aren't necessarily going to be turned down. I have no idea where my family is originally from before it somehow got to the United States. But I don't care. I know my parents and I know my grandparents, and the grandparents knew their parents, but I don't. I never met my great-grandparents. But if my great-great, let's just say that my family is from Uganda, I don't think I'd have any particular affinity to illegals or legals or H1B folks because they're also from Uganda. I'm America first, and I'll get into that a little bit later as I get to that comment of this friend of mine or former coworker of mine gave to me. But let's finish out here with the governor.
Immigration enforcement is focusing on illegal aliens that are in the country, in our state. Legal immigrants obviously have a right to be here. They're following the process. Now, that should not mean that someone here is H1B. Of course, they're not going to be sent. But if there's fraud, and if these programs should be reformed, they do need to be reformed. But I would not conflate the two. I think the media oftentimes, they try to frame it as if somehow somebody comes, they apply, they come to the United States, they're doing good, and it's like, oh, they're going to enforce against, quote, immigrants. No, they're going to enforce against illegal aliens, and that's really what we're talking about. So week of January 27th, I know that there's a lot of rank and file members of both the House and Senate that are chomping at the bit to be able to weigh in and make sure that Florida is leading the way in the states to help the incoming Trump administration accomplish their objectives. There's a whole host of other areas I think we're going to be working with. I mean, a lot of it is going to be, they're going to be empowering us to do more and more, whereas we usually had to overcome the Biden administration. I think you're going to see more and more responsibility provided to the states. I mean, I mentioned last week, give me the stuff for Everglades restoration for federal. We can do it much quicker than the Army Corps can do. We have a massive reservoir south of Lake Okeechobee. We want to make sure we do. Block grant the money. Give us the authority. We'll get it done. Higher education. Make sure we overhaul accreditation. Department of Education federally has got to approve that. We're ready to go on that. We know there needs to be. So there's going to be a lot of things that they're going to be empowering us to do, but this is one key example where we can help facilitate a key objective, not only for the incoming administration, but for our country. We got to get this issue right. We've been talking about it for decades and decades. Now's the time. President Trump has a mandate. State of Florida is going to be there working every step of the way. Thank you.
Well, I couldn't have said it better myself. I really like Governor DeSantis. Although I'm not a Floridian myself, I'm glad that he was around over the past 4 years, leading the way in how you should run a state during COVID. I was paying attention to what was happening in Texas, even though I was not a resident at the time. And I was disappointed in how Governor Abbott was leading things. And I was disappointed that he won re-election. To be honest with you, I really was. I wasn't a resident at the time, but I was paying attention. And Texas being a big red state usually leads the way on issues that are supposedly Christian conservative issues. That wasn't the case this time. The leadership really came from Florida, and they became more of a big red state than Texas has been. And Texas needs to get back to those roots. And I wonder if that will happen. We just saw here in Texas that the new Speaker of the House for the state of Texas is in the GOP, but not someone that the GOP wanted. The governor, neither the governor, the lieutenant governor, nor the attorney general wanted this person to be the Speaker of the House. In fact, the leader of the Texas GOP did not want this person to be the Speaker of the House. So the only reason they got that position is because of some Democrats who voted for this person, but such is the case. Now, over to this other issue, a comment that I got from a friend who knows that I'm looking for work. He encouraged me to make sure that I had an account on some sites that I already have accounts to, like clearancejobs.com. He talked about how he gets approached at times for jobs, but the pay isn't quite what he expects. And I got to talking about that. I said, yeah, I understand. I get jobs coming at me all the time that want to pay less than what I made 10 years ago, even though they want the extra 10 years of my experience. And I said, it can only be happening because of a surplus of talent into our industry. And he wrote back saying, that's interesting. How do you feel about the H1B situation? And I told him. And I went into the example that I'd given. I'm sure he wouldn't object to it because he's a veteran. My example was if a veteran applies to a job, a qualified veteran, and a regular citizen applies to the same job, it doesn't matter how much more qualified the regular citizen is, the veteran is going to get the job. By the same token, if a citizen applies to a job and a visa candidate applies to the same job, the citizen should get the same consideration that the veteran got in the previous example. I also brought up the issue I mentioned before about since the government allows these H1B candidates, these not just H1B, visa candidates, period, into our nation to infiltrate our industries. And the industry of tech is heavy laden with H1B talent. And in IT, a lot of that talent is working in cybersecurity. Is the government not then responsible for all the cybersecurity breaches that we're having of our personal information? Just a question I put out there. And he responded with this. Let's take a look at what he wrote. He wrote, this is what this friend of mine, and I have to put on my cheaters to read what he had to say, especially on this screen instead of that one. All good points. This is him responding to what I said about veterans and them having preferred status when it comes to employment. By the same token, the citizen should have preferred status over a visa candidate when it comes to employment as well. They should get the same consideration. He wrote, all good points. Veterans' preference, I would think, would only apply to government agencies or contacts. Nonetheless, in my opinion, providing a preference to U.S. citizens in the commercial sector would be better for Americans. However, in my opinion, that would be anti-capitalistic. Capitalism is indifferent to national, ethnic, religious, or any other demographic. It only cares about expansion and profit. Americans simply cannot reasonably compete due to our high cost of living standards. In my opinion, in some cases, immigrants are more qualified. However, capitalism would dictate it's more about their significantly reduced labor costs than solely their intelligence. American companies don't move factories overseas because foreigners are smarter. And any agency tasked with security confidential information should be held liable if that information is compromised. But can you reasonably attribute the compromise to foreign workers? Yeah. If they're making up such a great part of IT and they're working in cyber and the government allows them in, then yeah, they can have, it can be attributed to them, and it could also be attributed to the government allowing them in the first place. Now, I will say this former coworker is a veteran himself. He served for about 5 years, and he's a government contractor, 25 to maybe 30 years now. You want to guess whether or not any H1B people work where he works? No, none of them do. And you know why? They don't pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I do. I pledge allegiance to that flag. I pay my taxes to the flag of that nation. And because I do that, I want my nation to respect it, to respect me for doing so. And part of that respect means not putting your finger on the scale and creating a system that makes it hard for me to make a living and to keep paying those taxes that you want. So that's where he and I have a difference of opinion. I'm more, it's clear, it's not, it's binary to me. It's really easy for me to see this. He has a tendency to take every side of an issue, and I think he thinks that makes him look more nuanced and enlightened, maybe even smarter. But I think it really makes you seem mealy-mouthed and indecisive and just lukewarm. You're neither hot nor cold. You're lukewarm. And what does the Bible say about being lukewarm? God said he'll spit you out of his mouth because you're neither hot nor cold. And I'm very on one side of the issue or the other when it comes to this, because it's very simple. And I'm glad Governor DeSantis is looking into this in his state. I wish our state were doing more about it. Maybe they'll jump on the bandwagon. But now's not the time to try to wake up the sheep. I gave up trying to do that. That's why I don't talk to this guy, but so much about particular issues, because I feel like I'm waking up the sheep. I'd rather wake up the lions and let them know, hey, you're a lion, I'm a lion too. Let's go roar together. Let's go solve this stuff together. And when there are enough lions forming a parade, then maybe some of the sheep will join along in that. Anyway, this is something I wanted to share with y'all. My first reaction video. If this is your first time joining me, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button. It costs you nothing, but it helps me out quite a bit. And maybe like what you've seen, hit the thumbs up. See you next time. Bye-bye.